Not for the last time. I'm going to remind myself that I need to extend that to more than 30 seconds because it's kind of not helpful for only being a 30-second buffer. How's everybody doing tonight? Glad you got to join us and back after a little break for the Thanksgiving holiday last week. For everybody that is here, thank you much as always. Appreciate you. Do us a favor, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, doesn't matter. Either way, it helps a lot if you drop a like. Please do so. Much appreciated. Those that are sharing it as well, greatly appreciate you that do that because that is the best helping method for helping this grow. And yes, tonight I am hoping that we spend a lot of people's money. There's going to be a lot of gear talk, and gear talk seems to always burn a hole in everybody's wallets real friggin' fast. And we don't apologize for that. You know, it's one of those, if you spend something, cool. If not, don't even worry about it. Not everybody needs something new and fancy all the time, but it does feel nice when you get new stuff, you know, especially when you're filling out something that's like technique specific that you either really like or you're like, I really want to like take that to the next level next year. This is either going to help or hurt you. I don't know how else to say it. So before we really get into it, we got quite a lot to talk about tonight, but we are joined by Sean Miller, who has returned. This is probably your, fourth time on now?
I don't know, second, third, something like that.
It's either third or fourth. It's definitely not your second.
Well, I feel honored, sir. Thank you very much for allowing me to join you tonight to talk about our addiction.
Hey, man, I'm just glad you were able to join as well, because who else that would be better and obviously available too? This just works out. You know how to talk about this kind of stuff, and you are very well versed in Douglas rods and Defiant Fishing's line. So that covers two of the three things we're going to talk about tonight. And then we can add some reels in there, be a good mix of lose reels and then other reels that we've also used. So that's all going to help out a lot. And more importantly, I would say for everybody that's watching, you should have your wives watch so they know what to buy you for Christmas. Just throwing it out there.
And they have realistic prices too.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
And actually, you know what? Mike Bradley just put a comment in the chat that this is actually really good to bring up now because it was something we were going to bring up anyway. So evening, everyone, picked up a Douglas rod, Black Friday, 40% off. That is still ongoing. Sean, you want to tell everybody what they're doing there?
Yeah, so it's kind of to be determined how long that sale lasts for, but Douglas rods on their website, if you go to douglasoutdoors.com, they have a big banner on there for 40% off select rods in their lineup. Great rods, 40% off. Can't complain with that. And it comes with a lifetime warranty. So whether you break it on accident or it breaks naturally, most it costs you is $50 and you're back at the game pretty quickly. So good deal to take advantage of. And you have a rod that's going to last you a lifetime, and that one that you'll really enjoy. So check it out, douglasoutdoors.com, and fill up the cart.
Made it easy for everybody, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, doesn't matter. I put it in the chat, so you can just go ahead and grab that. It'll take you to it. As he said, it's only select rods. It's not all of them, but if you can find one of those that's in there that fits your needs, then 40% off is freaking hard to beat. That's a hell of a deal. What are they, the 784F? That actually could be a really good, like, soft body swim bait rod.
Yeah, so 784F is really good for you can throw chatterbaits on there if you really want to for a longer rod, but you can also throw like some nice soft plastic bag drafts, really nice on that, especially like the 6-inch, or if you're doing like 7-inch soft plastic. If you're doing some bigger soft plastics, definitely go with maybe a little different rod, but the 784 is really nice.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm just looking through everything else they have in there. I'm going to pick out a couple more that I see that are really intriguing. The X Matrix 764F. So it's a 7'6" medium heavy fast rod. That is definitely a good jig rod. That's the one that Andrew loved the most out of all the rods we've been using for them. The 715F, the 724F, or the XF. No, for casting, I think it's the 724F. I've used the 745F, the 744. The 765 XF is my current favorite. Andrew had the 764F. He really liked that. He also had the 744F that he really liked as well. Like that's another really good, like if you want a longer jig rod, that's a good one to look into.
I personally like the 766 for my jig rod. It may be overkill for a lot of people, but It's rated 3/4 to 4 ounces, which is pretty nuts. But I'll throw a 3/8 like little Magnum on it and flip around all day. But I love it. It's just stout, and that does the trick. So that's my go-to for a jig rod.
I have that, and I was using that extensively for my jigs to start, and it's awesome. It's just a little stouter than I would like to be throwing like all friggin' day. But boy,
Yep.
dude, I tell you, when it comes to throwing like a 1/2 ounce little Magnum from Beast Coast Fishing into the slop, and then the SDQT, the New Hampshire Bass Nation State Team Qualifying Tournament up on Champlain, I got into a hell of a swing head jig bite, and I was specifically throwing that 5/8 ounce structure head from Strike King, and I was catching all my fish like 12 to 16 feet. There was like this very specific window where that was working exceptionally well. I even posted a reel about it. One of my last reels, somewhere in the last like 4 or 5 reels I posted on Instagram, where I was like, there's a fish right there. And I'm, shorts and my sun shirt, and I flip out that thing right in front of me and I folded that rod. That was the 766 XF. That was awesome. It was a 4 1/4 pound smallie, like 20 feet in front of me. Thumped it, folded the rod on it. It was amazing.
Yeah, they also have the 703 moderate fast, and then they have the 704 moderate for those guys that like crankbaiting. You can throw jerk baits on them. I personally like the 684 for that, but you can throw jerk baits on them, but they're really good for like little cranks, kind of lipless stuff if you want to get into that, but anything with treble hooks. So there's definitely a good selection of rods to choose from. So head over there, buy them up.
I'll touch on that last one, then we'll really get into it because this kind of plays into well for what the game plan is for tonight for this topic. But the 704M that they have on there that you just touched on, that's a double duty rod for me. One, I primarily use it for my bigger jerk baits, like my Mega Bass Vision 110+2s. Love that rod for that. I found this past weekend, it is also awesome for a blade bait, with the exception of really, really long casts. I ended up losing a couple of fish that I swear to God, I was launching a 3/4 ounce blade bait 200 feet. And it was a little bit of a wind assist, but dude, I was bombing this thing. And I barely moved it, got trucked, and I'm like reeling down into it as I step as close to the edge of the boat as I can, while still reeling into it, taking 3 steps back and swinging to try and get a good hook set on it. I still lost some fish, but that was at the 200 feet away in 35 feet of water, right?
That's interesting. That's interesting with a casting rod on a blade bait, right? So Douglas has a dedicated blade bait rod, which is a 683 XF. But I will say, if you're going to throw a blade bait on a casting rod, that's probably the rod to do it. That was the rod that I started throwing jerk baits on. What I liked about it is the moderate action, right? And so like when the Mega Bass, the Mega Bass jerk baits have the tiniest, like stickiest little hooks, but they're super easy to bend out if you try to horse them in. So, at least with that rod, the way that it bends so deep into the blank that like it's hard for them to throw hooks. You're not bending hooks out. It's just a really, really nice rod. I mean, it still has enough backbone, but like you can kind of swing on them and not worry about have to like pulling them out of their mouths or bending the hooks out. So definitely a great rod. And I'll have to keep that in the back of my mind. I'll have to try it with a blade bait sometime.
The thing I liked about it, again, take away the extra long bombing casts and getting bit at the end of that, that's pushing it. I caught most of them, but I did lose a couple, and I know it's because I just couldn't get enough meat on that hook set on them. Even with, the trebles on the Binskis are a little stouter than normal. If you go on something that's not quite as stout, might not be as big of a deal. But anyway, anything inside of 150 feet, especially inside of 100 feet for the hook set, even at 35 feet deep, I didn't lose any of those fish. And I felt every single bite, even at the end of that 200-foot cast. And it was phenomenal. But the main reason why I was intrigued to try it, and I really was like, you know what, let's see how it goes, is because that medium, heavy, moderate action. I was like, I feel like with this on straight 12-pound fluoro, I should be able to like just barely kind of flex my wrist and get the tiniest little, like just a nice little low arcing hop and vibration out of my blade bait. And it worked friggin' meant for it. Because all last winter I was throwing mine on the 724 XF, and I love that spinning rod for that. But I really like that 704M. That was
for the blade bait. You were throwing a 724.
Yep, and that's my go-to, and I love it for that. That's actually what I like most for my snipers too. But we'll get to that. We're getting. I just saw a couple in there. There you go, 3D fishing. Can't go wrong with any of the rods Douglas has on sale in the moment. He is absolutely spot on. For anybody that jumped in after the fact, I put those links in there. So if you're interested, go into the chat, find it. There's a link, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching this, you'll get a link directly there. Looking ahead, and this plays in well to this conversation, coming up this winter, January 31st, February 1st, February 2nd is the the New England Fishing Expo in Marlborough, Mass. We will be there. And by we, I mean myself and Sean will be there for Real Northern Bass, Big Bass Dreams, Defiant Fishing, and a couple others to be announced that I'm not sure that's public yet, but we got some really good news coming. And very excited for that. But we're gonna have a triple booth just like last year, and it should be a really good show. Douglas will be there as well with their own booth. I'm assuming they're doing another 10 by 20.
We'll see. To be determined. We may cuddle up with Ben's Tackle Shack too, as they're one of our dealers down in the Massachusetts area. They do a really nice job with Douglas rods and all things fishing. To be honest, but they're a Douglas rods dealer. And they've been really, really good with to us and with Douglas, and we've got a great relationship with them. So we've always had fun I think at this point, it's not even the New England Fishing Expo. It is the Fishing Expo. It's a pretty damn good one in the Northeast, and one of the best in the country as far as I'm concerned. A lot of great vendors, a lot of things to choose from. Bring your wallets, bring your wife's purse, bring the ATM, bring it all, because you won't go home with any cash. We'll make sure of that. But you'll leave with a lot of goodies. So definitely looking forward to seeing everyone down at the New England Fishing Expo. And
a last parting point on that before we go, it's twofold. One, last year was the first year that he had it down in Marlborough. It was previously in Boxborough, and as good as that venue was, the Marlborough location, while not glitzy for lack of a better way to put it, it is 100 times better because it's just one giant open floor. It's easy to find absolutely everybody. It's wicked easy to get to off the highway, just like Boxborough was. There is a lot more shopping options immediately around the expo center. So you don't have to go down there just for that. There's like 20 different restaurants that are right there, from like your standard chains to a couple of like more local places that are like one-offs, including this ridiculously good sushi place that's just across the street. There's like an entertainment complex across the street with there's an arcade. There's a
go-kart thing too. It's like a Formula One go-kart thing across the street.
Yeah. Like literally across the street, maybe a quarter of a mile across down. Yeah. It's all right there. So massively convenient, tons of stuff to do outside of just going there for that. So it makes it much more worthwhile, especially bringing the family, right? You can make a whole day out of it. And then everything that we're going to talk about here, maybe with the exception of Defiant Line, I'll have to have Dan confirm on that if he's in here. You can find at Ben's Tackle Shack in Leicester, Mass. So if you want to go look at stuff in person and you don't want to wait for the New England Fishing Expo, you can go down to Ben's and he definitely has the Douglas rods on hand. He's got Lew's reels and plenty of other brands of reels that are on hand there. And he might have the Defiant Line. So let's confirm on that. Last but not least, and then let's get to it. Dogbone. Should we all wear Real Northern Bass hoodies? Sure. Why not? All right, Carl, fair enough. There's no bar. There was a bar at Boxborough. There's no bar here.
But I think you have hoodies for sale there, though. So they should buy them at the show and then wear them around, correct?
This is correct. And we are doing a new color scheme for hoodies that we haven't done yet this year. And doing something else that will only be at the New England show. I don't think we're going to do it at the New Hampshire one. We're doing some flannels, and they're going to be some really sexy color flannels. And I'm excited about that. And we're going to have new colored hats. We're going to do a whole bunch of stuff.
Are you doing onesies with butt flaps?
No, but you know what? That is a damn good idea.
Maybe for next year.
Great.
You gotta get the buttons though, the fold down butt flaps.
No, it's got to be, but that's going to be more expensive because I need my logo on both sides of the butt flap. See, now there's thinking. No matter what you're doing, the logo.
You should have Real Northern Bass on one side and Real Northern Ass on the other side.
I like that. Okay, last one. Mark asked, Sean, are you doing the Milford show too? Yes, I will definitely be at the Milford show. Probably have hoodies there and other stuff, but I won't be doing the flannels there. That'll be a New England show only. Because then what I'm hoping to do is have sun shirts for the New Hampshire show, because that'll be much closer to getting towards that warmer weather. So we'll see. Been talking about doing sun shirts for years. I finally found one that I like and can actually make that work. So,
hey, so there was a comment in here before we go too far. I don't want to kind of lose it. So Dropmint said, any Strolling forward-facing sonar spinning rod recommendations?
I saw it. Let me grab it because I made sure it was saved. There it is.
I think I will definitely get into it a little bit more because when we talk about setups that we use this year, I experimented with some different ones, and I kind of have a favorite, but I also have a couple that kind of fit the bill depending on what your choice is. But yes, yes, there are rods that will do exactly what you're looking for, depending on how you throw it, what kind of weight, what kind of head you're using, what your feel is, how you hold the rod, if you like the rod tip down, if you like the rod tip up, like if you like it to the side, it all depends right on the length. But to me, the two rods that I found that work the best for it, for me personally, are the 724 XF and the 6103 XF. And so when we get into it, right, the last numbers in the rod model refer to the power of the rod. So like when you hear the 6103, right, that means that's 610 and it's a 3, which is a medium light. The 724 is a 7 foot 2 inch medium, right? 4 is medium, 5 is medium heavy, 6 is heavy, 7 is extra heavy. So as you kind of get into that, that kind of tells you a little bit about the rods. But for me, those are the two rods. I've really liked the 6103 XF because I tend to, kind of put the tip down towards the water and work the bait that way. But you can also use it, tip up in the air, shaking the rod if you'd like to as well. The 724 is a little bit stouter of a rod, has a little bit more backbone to it. But the 6103 will definitely, do it as well. You can feel the bite. You can still pin them with it, with the extra fast action. It's easy to set the hook. But then again, when you're using those, the little jig heads or the minnow heads, they come with a small hook anyway. So it's not a huge issue trying to penetrate a giant hook in their mouth. It's pretty easy to do. But those are the two rods that I felt fit the bill a little bit better than the rest of them. So hopefully that answers your question for you.
I completely agree on both of those, although I will say the 724 XF is not my go-to for it. I tried it on a whim just because of the way I had all my rods set up. I had two that I was doing drop shot one day, and I liked the 763 for that better because I broke my one last custom drop shot rod. My last custom rod I had ever had made, it broke on me like 2 months ago now. Tip snap right off. So the 763 XF is great for a drop shot rod. Little long, but great. And so I had those two, and I was like, I really want a mid stroll. Well, let me try the 724 XF and see how that goes. And I was pleasantly surprised. Even throwing a 1/4 ounce head on it, like it did really well. It's a little stiff to really kind of get that twitchy, bouncy tip out of it that you can get out of the 763 XF, which is really my go-to for that. And I just recently used the 6103 XF, which I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot for both drop shot and for Demiki mid strolling. And it's great for all of those things. So completely agree with your first two. I would say out of my preference, the 763 XF, which is available both the X Matrix and the LRS for all three of these. 763 XF is my favorite. I like that longer rod and that extra length split up between the medium light and the extra fast combo. If you're just kind of lightly shaking your wrist, like you really get a lot of bounce out of like the last foot or so of that rod. So if you want some quiver and shimmy and shake in that bait, for me, I found it very easy to do with that 763 XF. The 6103 XF was my second favorite right behind that. It's a little bit harder to kind of get that shimmy shake out of it, but like Sean was saying, if you want to play the rod tip low, kind of close to the boat, it plays a lot nicer than that 7'6" rod. And then the 724 XF is kind of in between the two. It's got a little bit more meat to it, more backbone if you're like constantly hucking a 1/2 ounce or heavier weight and you don't want to feel like you're overstressing it. But it's definitely a little bit stiffer. So if you're just straight reeling it for your mid-strolling is phenomenal. If you're trying to work the tip a little bit and get some dancing, quivering action out of the tail on your bait, not my first choice, but it still works for it.
Yeah. What's nice about that 763 too is it's so long, but you can bomb like the lightest stuff. You can bomb it a mile. That's what's really awesome. And I think that was one of the first rods, that I kind of put in your hands was a 763, and you were like, "Yep, this is it, done." Fell in love with it, immediately. And it's a great rod, right? Like I use that for for a lot of things. It's a do-it-all rod. At a 7.6, people think it's super long and it's too much. I love it. It's great. Like it makes a wonderful spy bait rod, to be honest with you too.
Yes, and that's why I like it so much for my drop shot. There's for the same reason why I think it would excel for a spy bait, and that's the other reason why I wanted it, because it's really great for that. Dude, that thing has such a beautiful parabolic sweep out of it. It is nuts. And for something like a spy bait, teeny tiny little hooks, and you just really got to kind of lean into it real gentle, let your drag and your rod work for you. If you're throwing something as well, throwing mid stroll as well, like it's just, it's so good for it.
All right. So I guess you want to move on and talk about some of your favorite setups that you had this year for rods.
Yes, absolutely. I did see another one from Mark. I'm going to pin that for later. I would say before we get into it, that's kind of the gist of what we're going to do. Like this could go 100 different ways for how you want us to cover this. But what I am envisioning is I want to specifically cover some of my absolute favorite setups that I had for this year and go through the whys of why I decided like that was the best rod, that was the best reel, that was the best line possible for my personal preference for that specific technique. But more than anything, we're here to answer a bunch of questions for you guys as well. So any questions you have, just keep throwing them in the chat and we will get to it. We're going to bounce between talking a little bit, answering questions back and forth. So I really spent a lot of time last year kind of trying some different setups and trying to figure out, like, I want to challenge what I considered my norm, right? Like I was just always a 7.2 medium heavy fast for jigs. And like that's sure you can work on either side of that, but that's my favorite. I don't even want to deviate from that. And there really wasn't like a 1-to-1 for that coming to Douglas. And I was like, okay, well, I'll bounce around a little bit. This is my opportunity to get in my comfort zone. Let's see if there's something that I end up liking better. And I ended up trying quite a few different rods from Douglas last year and this year to try and dial in what I really felt was going to be my favorite jig setup. Let's get the easy one out of the way. And I ended up settling on two different rods that, one's kind of like short range, jack of all trades, do all. And then the other one's like my heavy / deep water jig rod application. So going with my absolute favorite that can kind of do everything is the 715F. And they have it both in the LRS model and the X Matrix models. So it's a 7'1" medium heavy fast. And it fishes very, very true to that setup. It's perfectly balanced. It's light enough, but stout enough that if I want to throw a 1/4 ounce sniper on it, pushing the envelope a little bit, but I can do it. 3/8 ounce and 1/2 ounce, it's a dream. I've thrown a 3/4 ounce, like 5/8 ounce baby dozer from Beast Coast Fishing, phenomenal. It also casts that awesome. 3/4 ounce max feel from Beast Coast Fishing, that big jig with like a big honking like 4.5 to 5 inch crawl on it. Towing the line on the high end of it a little bit, but that also does really well on that too. That's my favorite thing about that rod. I can pick up one and it can do all of those things. I've caught fish on that confidently without any issue on the end of a 150 to 175 foot cast down 50 feet on straight 15.5 pound fluoro heavy cover from Defiant Fishing. And I've also gotten up within 10 feet of docks and skipped a 3/8 ounce jig 20 feet back on the back of those docks over and over and over again. That's my favorite thing about that rod, because I can do all of that completely confidently. It's got just enough of the right backbone that if you want to go deep water with it, it can. But it's just supple and light and short enough that if you want to get close quarters with it and pick apart really tight cover or structure or skip under docks, it can do that too. Like it is truly my favorite jig rod that I've ever used because it can do literally all of it. Sorry, I had to sniffle. So what I have paired that with, I've kind of gone a couple of different ways with this. I ended up using 3 different reels on it this year. Ended up taking one of those and going to my bigger, heavier, longer jig rod in the end because I want some better line capacity on that. But I would say my favorite reel on that 715F is the Lose Hypermag. It is an 8.3 to 1 ratio reel. It's light. It's a 150 size reel, so it doesn't have a ton of line capacity on it, but it's really not that bad. It's almost more like a maybe like a 125 size. It's not quite a 150. It's not small like 100. Like it's not teeny tiny. I do wish there was a little bit more line capacity out of it, but with how fast I go through line anyway, it's not really a big deal. I can get one whole new spool of like a standard size spool of line from Defiant and spool up that reel twice. And that's good. That covers me for about a whole season, one spool per that one reel. But I like having that really, really, really fast, high speed gear ratio for everything that I'm doing. It's phenomenal. And I pair that with Defiant heavy cover, 15.5 pound straight fluorocarbon. I have tried going the braid to fluorocarbon leader route with my jig rods, and more often than not, that leader knot just pisses me off to no end. And I'm constantly just blowing that knot right by my thumb, and it kills my thumb and it pisses me off. But more than anything, I like running my reels really loose. Like I run them sloppy loose. Great for fluoro, very forgiving in a backlash. Braid, not so much. And if I'm fishing deep water and I feel like I'm potentially maybe missing out on bites because I'm not using braid, I just throw it on a spinning rod in the end. If I'm going out deep, more often than not, I've got a spinning rod set up that can. I'm fishing open water. I'm not going to fish super deep in vegetation. If I'm super deep where I need braid to make the most of it and make sure that I'm not missing a bite, then I'm just going to throw it on a spinning rod because I'm fishing open water. I'm not near any vegetation. Don't have to worry about it. That's my first go-to. That's my favorite. What is yours?
It's a good favorite. So I think this year, I did something that I never really did before. And so I like getting out of the comfort zone definitely hits home for me. I focused a lot every single time I went out this year. I threw a big bait.
You had a good damn year for it, so I would too if I were you.
but I mean, but it wasn't like that every day, right? Like there were days where it was like, okay, this is dumb. I'm putting this down, and like, why did I even bother? But I think like in order to get the confidence in those things, that you have to consistently throw them and know when to throw them, know when not to throw them, know when to put them down, know when to keep throwing them, know when to switch up colors or sizes or baits or whatever. But anyways, I threw a lot of big baits this year. And so my my go-to rod that I found for me was the 765. So I used the X Matrix. It was the 765F. So there's two of them. There's an XF and there's a F. The 765 Fast is a 3/4 to 3 ounce rod. And so my favorite glide bait this year, like I threw a lot of glides. My favorite glide bait was a Clutch Eco. Not super big, just the right size. And they're on the shad where I am. So I found a lot of success with that and those shad style profiles. But I really, really love the 765 from catching pike, pickerel, bass, smallmouth, largemouth. It did it all. That was some of the most fun fishing that I had this year. Was throwing it on heavy line on that rod, and that rod can handle it all too. And that's a great rod too for like A-rigs as well. So that is an A-rig rod, but it kind of doubles as a swim bait rod. That's what I used it for. So I was running it with 70-pound Defiant braid on it. I know a lot of people that will go a little bit more and do like 100-pound. To me, I didn't need to go that heavy, but what's great about Defiant braid is the line diameter is significantly smaller than what you would experience in other lines. And so like it's almost, and it's not exactly, but it's almost like half the size of other lines, right? And so like if you put 50-pound, 65-pound on 150, 200 size bait caster, you're not going to get very much on it. And it's going to fill up the whole spool. I mean, you could literally put a ton of this line on it. And so I didn't have to worry about, constantly changing out braid. If I felt like I wanted to, change up my shock leader that I put on there, I could, cut off a little bit of braid and still have a bunch left. So I went with 70-pound Defiant smooth casting braid. And then I also used a 35-pound shock leader on there for the Defiant shock leader. So that was what I used. I found a lot of success in that, but that was one of my most favorite rods to throw this year. Definitely have that bend to it. You can chuck a glide bait or a heavier bait a mile. You can use it for an A-rig rod. I enjoyed going braid to fluorocarbon for it and just tied a simple FG knot with like a 2 or 3 foot leader, and I found a lot of success in that. So that was definitely my favorite setup of the year and something that kind of got me out of my comfort zone. So definitely enjoyed it.
It's funny you bring that up because the other rod, my favorite rod that I figured out this year was the 765 XF, and I loved that setup for my bigger jigs. And that one, literally anything that was half ounce and heavier, if I was really just dedicated to fishing jigs for the day and I knew I was going to be getting into like that 15+ foot range, like often, that's really where I like that 765, where like we went up to a spot in Maine a couple times this year. And the deal there was actually fishing like 25 to 30 feet, open water, around like little isolated patches of just like this really light duty vegetation that was offshore. And anywhere you could see little pods of friggin' white perch swimming around them, you put your jig in between that little patch of grass and a little pod of the white perch, and we were smoking fish every time. It was ridiculous. And then if they weren't in that, you could see them, but man, if they were any closer than say like 70-ish feet within the boat and you threw at them, they spooked. But if I could see them on the far edge of me at like 100 feet while they were down that 25 to 30 foot range, put a jig on them out there at that point, they were eating it almost every time. And that 765 XF was phenomenal in fishing in those conditions where I'm fishing in, really kind of that deeper water, not really deep, but just deep enough, and still fishing around kind of some stout vegetation with a half ounce, or even some of the fish I was catching was on the 5/8 ounce baby dozer from Beast Coast Fishing. And that was loved that rod. That was still using the 15.5 pound heavy cover from Defiant. But that one I was not using a lose reel. That's the only non-lose reel I don't have. It's a Corrado 200 XG, which is still 8.5 to 1. I think it might be 8.2 to 1.
I think it's 8.1 to 1, but yeah, something like that. 8.1, 8.2.
Yeah, which also real.
I see a couple comments down here about big swim baits. So Kevin Joyle, depths 250. It has to be Andrew's favorite, the 807.
Yeah,
that's really like that's the stout rod. That's an extra heavy. It's an 8 foot. It's a damn good rod for throwing big glide baits.
I agree with that. I used it. I don't have that one yet, but Andrew does. Like I used it several times when we were out there, and it's dumb how light it makes that depths 250 feel.
It's rated 6 ounces to 14 ounces. Yep. And it's like it's comfortable in hand. You can still pin it underneath your elbow. Or for that torque and getting the fish in the boat. You can cast it a mile. It's just a really comfortable rod to fish all day for some big baits. But as far as like swim bait, like big swim baits go, I mean, you could use the 746, but really kind of the 766 kind of starts it off for like single jig style hook. A lot of guys in kayak fishing like the 766 because it's like a little close quarter combat. It's a 7.6 rod that they can throw swim baits on. But then you get into like that 711, and they make it in the LRS and the X Matrix. But you get a 711, 7115, 7116, the 805, the 807, the 764, the 784, the 765. I mean, there's a lot of great swim bait rods in there. The longer 711 8-foot rods, those are for like your bigger baits, and then like the medium heavy would be treble hooks, that kind of stuff. Any of the heavy, you're really looking at either large treble hooks or single jig style hooks on your soft plastic swim baits. 7116, great Defiant 210 rod. That's a really nice one to throw, or if you're using any line throughs, that's a nice rod that'll handle it as well. So there's lots to choose from for swim bait guys as well.
Yep, and DJ put it perfectly. You can use the 805, but when tossing in 250, the 807 is amazing. I will say I have the 805. It's rated 3 to 7 ounces. I don't have the updated model. I have the original 805, which kind of had a stubbier handle to it from the reel seat down. Well, from the reel seat down. The new one, the 805D, is quite a bit longer. It's the same handle that you have on the 807, and it's a much more balanced setup than the original 805. Don't let that detachable handle throw you off. Like it's sturdy. It's stout, and it's just way better balanced now with that longer grip to it. I will say that 805, I would not feel very comfortable throwing a Depths 250 on it, even though it's rated for it. It's not quite right. Something about that Depths or any other like 9.5 inch and bigger glide, you want to overshoot what it's rated for to throw it. It feels 10 times better.
The sweet spot's like right in the middle of the rating too, right? Especially as you get towards those like giant, heavier ones. Like it's 2 ounce to 7 ounce. So you kind of want to stick right in the sweet spot. You don't want to test the limits, especially when you're throwing a giant bait that in some cases weighs more than the fish that's trying to go after it.
Right, exactly. So the 805, that was one of the first rods I got from them last year at the beginning of the season. Is that right? Or was it the year before? No, it was last year. Whatever it was. Everything's a blur, man. Time is just blurred. At any rate, 805 I use for so much stuff, it's not even funny. The only two things out of all my big swim baits that I don't throw on the 805 is my Depths 250 and my shad glide from Bull Shad, because that's a 9.5 inch glide, and I think it's 5 ounces, maybe 5.5 ounces, so it's only a little bit lighter than the Depths. And I have thrown it on it, but it didn't feel comfortable, so I really gave up on that quickly. But literally everything else I have, like both of my Pats, which one of them's a little smaller, the other one's a little bit bigger. They're not that heavy. I think my smaller Pats is like 2 3/4 ounces. My bigger one's 3.5. Handles it like a dream. All my A rigs, I throw it on the 805, 8-inch mag drafts, not a problem. I'm trying to think what else I've got. Golden Bell Customs, I've got one of his glides. Throws it without a bat an eye. The Perchzilla from Mr. Tight Lines, which is definitely a bigger crank down. That's pretty heavy. I want to say that one's probably about 5.5 ounces. Handles it just fine. Anything I had Todd Customs bait, his 3-piece trout handles that. Like I have thrown a ton of stuff. It is phenomenal. So that 805 between those two, dude, it'll do everything you need.
It does it. Like, a lot of guys use it for crawlers, wake baits, that kind of stuff. Like, I threw a Psycho Trout on it, Psycho Gill. You can do everything with that. So a lot of great swim bait rods. We'll have some of those down at the show too. So definitely come check those out.
Yep. That 805, great for like literally any of those hard body swim baits, crank down, wake, whatever. Still also really good for soft body. That 6-pound, 10-ounce largemouth I caught last year on the Citizen 6 was on the 805. And it's like, it really doesn't matter what you throw in it. You're looking for another swim bait rod that you don't need to handle the depths. That 805 is just money.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, it's a medium heavy too, so you still get a lot of good bend out of it, right? And it's an 8-foot rod, so it bends actually really deep into the blank. They have the 805 in the LRS and the X Matrix, and I found that the LRS was a little stiffer for me personally. The X Matrix was a little stiffer, and the LRS was a little bit more parabolic. It bended a little bit more. It was a little lighter feeling to me, which is kind of the opposite of the lineups. Like LRS tends to be the stouter, heavier rod when compared, model to model, and the X Matrix is kind of like a little lighter, finessier, bendier kind of rod feeling. But the 805 in either lineup is great. I mean, I think I sold one to Alex, a couple of years ago that he was jumping into swim baits, and that was his first rod too. So definitely gets a lot of love. But I have to go back to my favorite rod for the Beast Coast open water sniper, because I know that this is a big topic, and I know that I go back and forth between wanting to use a cast. Okay.
Before you get there, before we get off the swim bait topic, we didn't talk about line too much. You did a little bit. You brought up braid that you like, but did you mention what you use for your? Are you going straight braid, or did you mention a leader?
No, so I use a leader, and so for me, like, especially when you're fishing a glide bait and stuff like that too, you're not just burning it, working it hard. You kind of want that invisibility around the bait a little bit, and kind of for that stealthiness. And it also helps with your hooks not getting all bungled on the line when you turn the glide bait, jerk bait, whatever it may be, right? If you're using braid to a fluoro leader, it helps with it's a little stiffer than the braid. So when your bait turns, it doesn't hook itself onto your line. And that's really what I look for. So I use 70-pound Defiant braid to the 35-pound shock leader. I just use about a 2-foot, 3-foot leader. Wasn't anything crazy. I could retie it as many times as I want to. But I basically just threw like a 2-foot leader on it and did a direct tie a lot of times. So my glide baits, sometimes I would use like a little snap, like a decoy snap or something. But that's what I found for my big swim baits. When I was using cranks, like crank downs, wakes, that kind of stuff, I threw it strictly on the heavy cover, right? And so that's where I went with the heavy cover. I mean, you could go as light, as heavy as you want. I found a lot of the success in like the 23.6 pound range. I did get up to the 28.9, but I think for me and what I was using, I didn't personally go up to the 35 pound just because I thought that was overkill. I didn't need that extra line diameter, and I could actually fit more fluorocarbon on the reel. But I was using 300 size reels, whether it be a Alexa or a Daiwa Tatula 300. Those were my reels that I used for my big swim baits. But I do have another one in the arsenal that I just got. So I'm looking forward to breaking that one out next year. But yeah, be nice.
Yeah, I haven't done. Oh boy, what do I have? I have braid on one of my swim bait setups, and it's actually on now. Actually, I forgot about this one. The only custom made rod that I own left, and it was the first swim bait rod I ever got. It's a rated 1/2 ounce to 3 ounces. So there's not a lot that I can do with it really anymore. There's too much stuff I have that tell you what, it makes a great punching stick, but swim baits, I kind of lost my love for throwing them on this. It's just a little too light duty. But on that, because it does work for quite a few of like my awaken cranks, I like it for that. So I still have braid on there because I find it does help a lot. I use the Defiant 70-pound on that. And then it's funny, I have it on there not only for any of my top water big swim baits, but I have it on there for now the 3rd straight year, hoping, fingers crossed, eventually the grass comes back on Champlain. I go back out punching grass mats again, which I got to do with that rod once. And
that's about how long the grass lasted in the last 3 years up on Champlain. So
I know,
accurate.
It's ridiculous. 3rd straight season where I was like, yay, we get to go punch mats. And I'm like, damn it, there's no grass. Just all right. Anyway, it's fine. Everything's fine. Aside from that, on all my others, I run primarily the 23.6 pound soft casting, not the heavy cover. I like the soft casting. There's something about it. It's not quite as stretchy as mono, but it's definitely got a little bit more give than your standard fluorocarbon, which I like with all of my bigger treble hook type swim baits. And I don't know, it just works because even though like it's a little stretchy, that 23.6 pound doesn't stretch like a mile. So for me, I like it. It's just a nice happy medium. Everything feels phenomenal on it. When I set the hook and I bury it, even on my big tribbles, like everything just feels great. And even throwing an A-rig, I typically throw that on the 23.6 pound as well, and it works great. But I have thrown it on the 18.4 pound, and that also still holds up exceptionally well. But the 18.4 pound, I throw that on the heavy cover, not soft casting. And I have absolutely laid the hammer. I mean, Christ, I went out. I'm not even joking. I went out to the Connecticut River back-to-back weekends, and between those 2 trips, I think I caught 70 some odd smallmouth. No, and then I went again the 3rd weekend. I forgot about that because we went somewhere else and it sucked. So we stopped at the river on the way home, and I put on another handful of fish. I want to say I probably caught 70 fish over the course of 3 consecutive weekends, all on the exact same Alabama rig on the one knot that I tied.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too. Like, we're talking a lot about the fluorocarbon and like how good it is and how much we like it. But for me, like, I will say, after using Defiant line, I noticed myself not retying as often as I normally would. The line abrasions aren't there the way that they were with some other fluorocarbon lines. And even braid too. Like, Sean and I were talking earlier, and like, I'll break the braid before I break my knot or the fluorocarbon. It's just kind of crazy. Like, if I get stuck and I'm like yanking on it, right? Like, I'll break the braid above my knot, which is kind of crazy. And it's a testament to the strength and resiliency of the Defiant fluorocarbon line. It's awesome. And I enjoy it. I haven't noticed any other fluorocarbon line on the market that behaves and lasts as long as this stuff.
Dude, the best thing that I can say about the Defiant line is I was a diehard Seagar line guy for years. And I mean, I got started with a red label because it was cheap. That's all I could really afford when I was buying for a bunch of rods. And I started making, doing better in my career, made more money, and I moved up to the Abrasics. And I went with that across the board on everything. And I loved the Abrasics. Phenomenal line. Lived and died by it. And then I get the Defiant heavy cover, and I'm not just saying this to blow smoke up anybody's ass. I'm not saying it because they're sponsoring me. Like, I wouldn't have gone with Defiant if they didn't blow my friggin' mind out of the water with how good the line is. I'd like to think over the years I've been doing this that I've been true to my word every single time I've said this. That Defiant heavy cover really does outperform the Abrasics. It is a superior line. The abrasion resistance on it is so much better. I wasn't retying nearly as often. I don't break off anywhere near as many fish as I used to. Like, it's ridiculous how good that line is.
Yeah, I mean, like, I tend to go a little bit overkill with mine too, right? Like, I don't want the line to ever dictate whether or not Jesus Christ.
That's brotherly love right there.
Ryan Miller Golf is here in the chat. Everyone, go say hi to Ryan Miller Golf. He's out of retirement for the night. So, but yeah, I mean, like, I try not to go like super light. There's a lot of people who are like, you got to go the lightest you can possible. To me, it doesn't necessarily matter. I want to make sure that when I set that hook, and I like to set the hook hard, hook sets are free, right? Swing for the fences. So when I set that hook, I want to make sure that that fish isn't going anywhere, and I can dictate the fight all the way into the boat. Defiant line does that for me. I absolutely love it. My favorite. Deej kind of threw one down there in. Oh my God, he paid for that one too.
Yes, he did.
Wow. Deej threw that out there too about the braid, right? And so, like, I think the first time that I picked up Defiant line and I looked at the braid, I was like, I got to throw 10 or 12 pound braid on my spinning reels. And that's just kind of what I did. Right. We talked about a little bit before about how it's kind of like half the size of other braids on the market. But it's still like an 8 strand, right? It's an 8, but it's round. It's not flat. It's so nice. Like, I have significantly less wind knots. I think I maybe got one, and that may be a stretch. I may just be lying here for the sake of it. But I used to get it all the time. I threw Seagar, I threw Power Pro, Yozuri. It didn't matter. And I always got wind knots, especially on my spinning gear. I don't think I really got any this year. And I fished some really terrible conditions out here in New York that were gust and wind, and like, it wasn't fun. But I didn't get the wind knots, right? The thing that I noticed is I was like, oh, I picked up a 10 or a 12 pound Defiant braid, and I was like looking for the line because it's so thin, right? Like, you can't find it. It's literally like the same diameter as like a 4 pound or 6 pound braid. It's insane. So I was like, there's no way in hell that I'm going to be able to be out there on the water and tie any sort of knot that's going to hold together with 10 pound braid. Like, I just don't think that you need it. Like, I would fish 10 pound braid on an ultralight setup fishing for trout and not think twice about putting a little leader on it. Like, that's how thin it is. and invisible, it's pretty damn awesome. But for me, the 22-pound on as well as DH here too, 22-pound braid was the ticket for me. I ran that on all of my spinning rods this year and absolutely loved it. Didn't break off at all.
No, I did the 18-pound for anything that I run. The 7.8-pound fluoro, the soft casting fluoro for my leaders for like anything super light duty, and then anything where I'm running like 10, 12 pound, well, pretty much 12-pound and up, I got the 40-pound. Because with that, for those two spinning rods, the 724 XFs that I have the 40-pound on, like I am exclusively fishing like 12-pound or a heavier fluorocarbon leader on that, and I like my line diameter to be kind of closer to each other when I get into a heavier fluorocarbon, or else I tend to have problems with my Alberto knot. So I found I had less issues by going up a little bit on that. And then there's some times where if I'm just like throwing a Senko, like I literally every tournament, I will have a wacky rig Senko tied on, and more often than not, and get away with straight braid on it. Like, screw it, I'm going to throw a heavier diameter braid in there because I'm usually throwing it into the weeds while I'm swinging for the fences. So I was like, yeah, I want the 40-pound. And but dude, it's stupid. How strong it is for how thin it is.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, like I personally, I use either the 14 or the 15 and a half on the 22-pound. I don't mind it. The thin diameter braid cuts into that fluorocarbon for me, so it holds those friction knots really well. I tie FGs. I really like it. It's awesome. So can't say enough good things about the line. I mean, I think like you're only as good as like the rod and the line, right? And I think you can get away a little bit more on the reel. But what's really important, I think, is a quality rod and quality line. You can do a little bit more with a lower end or not as good of a reel. But you got to have the right rod, got to have the right line. I see mainstream fishing in here asking a question, what rod series? They're talking about the 715, the 745. He was looking for a jig rod. You can go with any of the lineups. You can go the X Matrix to the LRS all the way down to the Era lineup. They have a 715 and a 745 in every single lineup. And you can't go wrong with either one. The Era is a wonderful sub $100 rod. That's awesome. So we put them through their paces on Champlain. Great rod. It'll do everything you want. It just depends on, how much money you want to throw on a rod. If money's tight and you don't want to spend too much, you could spend $300 and get 3 awesome rods, or you could spend $300 and get 1 awesome rod. It's entirely up to you. If money was an object, I would opt for the 3 Era rods, and you will have a jig rod, a frog rod, a Texas rig rod, a chatterbait rod, a spinnerbait rod, whatever you want to throw on it, little tiny swim jig rod, whatever. It'll do it all. They're all workhorses, so can't go wrong in either lineup.
Yep. No, dude, I cannot say enough good things about the ERA rods. It has got to be by far the most impressive $100 rod I've ever used, which I want to go kind of lightning round here because I was hoping to keep this close to an hour, and we're butting up against that 9 o'clock window here. But Dogbone, what brand? Oh, no, not that one. Sorry, Mark. There it is. Does anyone use the ERA series yet? It says that a newer rod series. So I don't know if it's been released yet. Thanks. Yes, it has been released. Yes, I have used it. I've got 2 different rods. I've got the, what the hell is that? Spinning ones, a 7-foot medium.
704.
Yeah, 704. Awesome. Love that rod. I used it for top water and like blown away by how good it was for that. I've used it for a drop shot. Little light on the action side for what I prefer for drop shot, but it works. Ned rig, it's actually pretty awesome. Mid strolling, surprisingly good for it. And I think that's about Demiki, like just straight vertical dropping Demiki. It's been pretty good. And then I have the 7.4 medium heavy fast on the casting side of that. Holy hell. That is a phenomenal. If you guys want like a just knock your teeth out $100 jig rod, 7.4 medium heavy fast ERA rod. I cannot begin to explain to you how impressive that rod is for that price point. It is stupid.
It's a good frog rod too.
Oh yeah, dude. And that's the thing. Like, it's got so much backbone, but it doesn't feel stiff. It doesn't feel like, a flipping stick but it's got the power of a flipping stick. It's strange. I can't explain it, but it's also light. Like, it's not a heavy rod. For a 7.4 rod, like, it's honest to God one of the most mind-blowing rods I've ever used. And for $100, like, it doesn't feel like it should be like a $200+ rod the way it feels and performs. So I don't know. I know that that probably sounds like I'm spewing absolute BS out of my ass, and I promise you I'm not. I use the ever living hell of that rod since it a little before they got like launched. And
yeah, we went to Champlain and we fished those rods.
Dude,
and
6-inch mag draft, quarter, 3/8, half ounce, 3/4 ounce football jigs. I was throwing a Jika rig and a free rig on it all year. I was throwing a jackhammer on it, 3/8 ounce, half ounce, 3/4 ounce, doesn't matter. It was great. Spinnerbait, it was friggin' awesome. What the hell else did I throw on that? Actually, that might be the majority of it. Oh, just Texas rig soft plastics, weightless Texas rig flukes and Senkos. Like, my God, dude, there was no limit to what I could do with that rod. And I made it a point to see how many different techniques I could get away with throwing that on. And it just continued to blow my mind. Like, holy shit, I can make this work. Like, I mind blown by how good that rod is.
That's the thing when it comes to the Douglas rods, right? With the lineup that they have, all the different models that they have. I mean, it comes down to personal choice and preference, right? So, like, if you like a stouter rod, there's a stouter rod. If you like a lighter rod that bends a little bit more, that doesn't feel so much as a broomstick, there's a rod for that. If you like something longer, that's lighter, there's a rod. If you like something shorter and lighter, shorter and heavier, like there's a lot of different rods for a lot of different applications. And on the website, if you go on there, you can click on the rods and it'll tell you, well, it's great for top water, it's great for swim baits, great for large or extra large swim baits, great for jig, great for this and that. That's a rule of thumb, right? That's just a reference. That's a guide to kind of give you some place to start. Know how much your lure, your bait weighs, what kind of angler you are, what you like, what you don't like. Do you like a faster tip? Do you not like a faster tip? Do you like a stouter rod when you set the hook? Me personally, I like to feel like I am yanking that fish out of the water 100 yards up into the air when I set the hook. I don't like the feeling of like a rod just kind of whipping over when I go to set that hook. So I tend to err towards the stouter, heavier rods. But yeah, it's all personal preference. But just know that there's a rod for you in either one of the lineups, all three of them, that'll do the trick. So Get to a dealer, talk to Sean, talk to me, reach out. We'll be happy to answer questions. Alec, DJ are all in here too. Like they're fishing them, they're loving them. There's a lot of people that are passionate about it, and will answer any questions. So
yeah, absolutely. Tons of people can answer those questions for you. Another one from Mark. How's the Defiant fluoro as far as memory and castability goes? Honestly, that's probably one of my favorite and most impressive things about the Defiant line is the lack of memory in it. Even that 23.6 pound soft casting, which, typically the heavier the fluorocarbon you go, Mark knows this, other people don't know this. Typically the heavier line weight that you go, the more memory and the more quickly you're going to have line memory. From my personal experience, that 23.6 pound was the first line that I used, and I spooled it up very late in the year, tied it on, threw it for my big swim baits and especially my A-rigs. And even when I went to go use it 6 months later, I was like, there's like hardly any memory in this. So then I went to the 15.5 pound and I had it on there an entire season and there was next to no memory on it. Like, it is really, 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 really freaking good line. It is definitely a premium line.
Yeah, like I didn't switch out any of my heavy cover line on my big baits from last year to this year. And I was fine. Threw a little line conditioner on it, kind of stretched them out a little bit, and was good to go. So, can we talk about open water sniper rods, because that's a big thing in the Northeast.
I think I got rid of that one. Clyde, that. Okay, last one before we go to that, and then we can wrap it up with that. But what brand rods did you use before Douglas? For me, my God, there was no end to what I did use. I did use Lew's. And I still have Lew's rods that I still use, and I love them. They're phenomenal rods. I have zero complaints about that. I will say that the X Matrix line of rods from Douglas is better than anything that Lew's offers, but they're doesn't mean that Lew's is garbage. So I still use 3 of their Super Duty rods, and I still use a couple of their Team Lew's Custom Pro rods, and they're all great. Prior to that, I used a lot of St. Croix rods. I tried a few Dobbins, Abu Garcia, and oh God, no, I said Dobbins. No, what the hell's that white rod? Duck it, piece of crap.
Oof.
Yeah, no, never again. Garbage, hot garbage. Anyway, that's what I've used prior to Douglas. Okay, unless you want to answer that question too, let's talk about open water sniper setup. We'll wrap this up.
So I'll answer that really quickly. So I loved Dobbins rods before. A lot of the rods that I had were Dobbins. 13 Fishing, used G. Loomis, St. Croix, even Berkeley Lightning rods were some of my favorite. They were like $17 and they were awesome. The Berkeley Cherrywood. That's what it is. It was awesome rod. But then I started using Douglas and it's over. Didn't look back. Love it. Don't regret my decision.
No, not at all.
Yep.
Okay, open water sniper. What's your favorite setup?
744 X-Tack spinning.
Ooh.
That's my personal choice on the open water sniper. Now, I will say, and this is where I think that our opinions differ a little bit, but I appreciate it, and I've thrown it on your rod too, and I can vouch for you when you say that you run your reels very loose, because it always comes with a warning, careful. And but for me, with the open water sniper, majority of the time I'm targeting those larger fish offshore with the open water sniper. Most of the time, smallmouth. For me, I like the spinning rod, because what I don't like on casting setups, my drag is pretty much locked down on all of my casting setups. I do not like the feeling of setting the hook and having drag come out on my casting setups. That's a personal preference of mine. So I like to be able to set the hook on the open water sniper, knowing that I'm not going to pull it out of its mouth, that I'm going to set the hook well. I can keep my drag a little bit looser and start the drag pulling on a spinning rod. I tend to throw it on a 744. That is my open water sniper rod. I always have an open water sniper tied on to the 744, and it can handle every single weight of the open water sniper that is out there. So you can tie on a 3/8, half ounce, quarter ounce. It does it all. You can do any of them. That's why I like it.
What about reel and line? To go with
that. Line, already covered it. Defiant 22 pound and 15.5 or 14 heavy cover, right? Because whenever I'm fishing that, it's probably around a hard bottom, some rocks and something like that. So I do like the heavy cover for that. 14 or 15.5 reel. Shimano guy through and through. All but 2 reels that I own are Shimano, both American and JDM versions. I think the best spinning reel out there is a Shimano Stratic. Final answer. The Vanfords are really nice. I don't think it's worth the extra $59, $50, whatever it is. Shimano Stratics, till the day I die, I've got more of those. The drag is awesome. Great reels. And I don't go any further than a 2500 series. So I don't think you need a 3000 series. I just think it's too bulky, too big, especially on some of those light rods. I do 2500 across the board. That's it. And Shimano Stratic for the win.
I would agree with you. If I could get a 2500 size out of Lew's, then that would be my go-to. But they do 2000, 3000. So they're on either side of it. So I have used a lot of 2000s, and I do like them for any of my heavier line setup, but I like my 3000 a little bit better, even though it's a little bit overkill on the size. But when I'm going that light line, really light lure application, I want to bomb that thing, then that 3000 series is very nice. I'm not that far away from you for my ideal open water sniper setup. I use the 724 XF. That's my favorite thing. I will say, if you haven't tried it yet, I recommend it. If you want to throw that quarter ounce sniper with that teeny tiny little friggin' trailer on it, and you want to throw that thing far and fish it deep, try 763.
How did I know that you were going to say that?
I just did it on a whim when I was out in the pond, that you know where the hell I'm talking about.
Yep.
And I did it this year. I'm trying to think, middle of summer. They were just being weird. and they were deep and they were fishing wicked fickle. And I'm like, you know what? Screw this. So hang on. Damn it. All right. So I grabbed one of my corner on snipers. I ended up trimming the skirt back even further than I normally would. And I put a teeny tiny little chunk of a friggin' minuscule craw trailer on there. And I had my 8-pound on because I was throwing a drop shot. I'm like, dude, I'm going super finesse on this, back my drag off a little bit so I could like really let the drag work for me, but I could kind of like hammer it still to make sure, because it's, you know, it's got a BKK hook on there. It's pretty stout even on the 1/4 ounce. So I was like, I got to lean into this a little hard. And I was throwing it down in 45 feet of water. Holy hell, that was fun. And it started working immediately. And then like I was fishing with Andrew, I think David, Roy, and by like the 3rd or 4th fish, they just both looking like, are you kidding me? I was like, I told you I had a hunch and it worked, and that rod was awesome for it. But 724 XF is my absolute go-to. I only use the X Matrix on all my spinning rods. I got nothing against the LRS stuff. I'm just bougie. And while I did get a couple of those for free, all the other ones I paid for. So don't say I have them just because I got them for free. That is not entirely the case. I just really like for my spinning rods to be as nice as they possibly can, because I've only got a few of them and I want them to be as light as possible while also as sensitive as possible. And then I pair that with the Defiant 40 pounds smooth casting braid to the Defiant 11.8 pound, or is it 11.6 pound? 11.6 pound heavy cover more often than not. Sometimes, like if I'm up on the St. Lawrence River, if I'm up on Champlain, I'll throw it on 15.5 pound for my leader, because zebra mussels are a bitch, man. And all that shale rock and everything is also a nightmare. And I don't like screwing around and taking any chance with it. So I go heavy on it. But then for my reel on any of my spinning setups, I either have the Lose Hypermag or I have the Custom Light. And even though the Hypermag is supposed to be a better reel and it's more expensive, I like the Custom Light better. And it's not too bad. I think it's 140 for that, which is kind of steep, but not too steep. I think the Hypermag spinning reel is now 150 or 160. It's gone up a little bit. It's a magnesium body, and magnesium ain't cheap. But oh god, I love both those reels. But the Custom Light is by far my favorite, and 3000 series across the board on all those. If they had a 2500 to go that way, I had the 2000. I like that. It was okay, but I like the 3000 better, especially in my lighter line applications. Damn, dude, we got a lot done today.
Yeah, I mean, I will say too, and I don't think that we've talked about it as far as like where to start with a good quality setup. So just real quickly, just want to touch on that. Like, I'm a firm believer. When I first started fishing, it was kind of like I want to check this out. I want to see if I like it, the whole 9 yards. And so I didn't really spend a whole lot of calories and money on it. It was kind of just, I went the cheapest route that I could possibly do. And then I found myself replacing a lot of rods, reels, the whole 9 yards, line. I'm a firm believer in right around that $100 price point. And I think when you start to hit $100, you start to get into a higher quality rod, reel, whatever it may be, where you're not going to have, breaking, eyes popping out of your rod, buttons on your reel disintegrating and not being there anymore, handles breaking, bearings going. I mean, I think, $100 rod, $100 reel and up, you get something that'll last you a very long time if you take care of it, keep them clean, the whole 9 yards. So, for me, the Era rod fits the bill, and even, Shimano SLX, whatever, that does it as well. So, I mean, you can't go wrong with those. That's like a good starting point. If you want something that you can pass on to your kids, you want something that's going to last you more than a year or two, that you'll enjoy, that you're not going to just forget about in the garage or the closet. Start with $100, $200, pretty easy, to spend that and not feel, super bad about spending that money. So definitely start with quality stuff, guys.
Yep. I could not agree more on that, man. That was very well said. I have nothing to add to that. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I tell you what, I see people kind of dropping off like flies here, so I think we wrap it up. Not sure what to do next week, but I will say if you guys want to continue this conversation, get a little bit more specific, then we can absolutely do that. I will say for if you really are interested in, all right, at any point, if you want more questions, like Sean said, if you have more questions, reach out. You can either reach out to myself, you can reach out to Sean. What would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
You can hit me up on Instagram. It's SPM_fishing.
There you go. And if not, then also DJ, our buddy, who's also with Douglas, he said he'd be happy to answer you. He is 3D_fishing on Instagram. Hit him up there. He can answer all your questions. Even Alec, in the chat, he said he'd be happy to answer your questions. There's no shortage of people that can answer your questions. You can also always go down to Ben's Tackle Shack in Leicester, Mass, and they'll be happy to answer any and all questions for you, and as well as have rods on hand to show. Get down there and get a feel for them as well, and you'll be good. Otherwise, we'll see you guys at the New England Fishing Expo, January 31st through February 2nd, down in Marlborough, Mass. That's going to be great. Man, I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think that's good.
We could have gone down a rabbit hole.
We could have, and it never would have ended. So for everybody that's here, but if you haven't done so yet before you leave, please drop a like on the stream. Would really appreciate it. That helps a lot for just helping the channel grow. And we will be back next week for sure, every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, for the Real Northern Bass Talk live stream. Thank you all very much. Greatly appreciate you guys. Catch you next week.